first presentation actually will be conducted electronically by Damaris Mbua, who will be joining us from Kenya. So I'm going to allow Kendra to set that up, and I hope you all enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yes.
All right. So, okay, if I may start now.
Yes, you can start. Yes, please start.
All right, thank you. My project was about training communities in Good Division about integrated soil management and conservation. So the project has two aspects. The first is about creating awareness to influence behavioral change. And then the second one is now the one that is an actual action-based project. So just a background about myself. I'm a lawyer, also a community sort of activist, and I try to empower my community a lot. So I've trained like 50 communities in my county on issues related to water and sanitation, to soil conservation, and how to use energy-saving cookers. Then I've also mobilized my community to start a girls-only high school, during which time I also had to serve as the teacher we wanted to. Now the school has picked up and it's doing very well. So that tells you I'm very passionate about helping communities in remote and marginalized areas. So the project itself, let me come to this a little bit later. The project is targeting community members in arid areas of Peru. I want to in about 20 community groups, about comprising of 20 representatives from the area. So I have not identified exactly the representatives of each household, but the cumulative number will be like 20 communities, groups, with of 20 just representatives. So I want to, the goal is to increase food production in order to cater for basic needs of the community, to end hunger, poverty, and promote good health and well-being, as well as just a reaction to climate change. The time period for this is 3 months. So within 3 months, we will have 20 trainings, one for each of these community groups. So this is to provide a perspective. This is the area. You can see it's very dry, it's quite arid. So now we have to normally dig terraces to capture the water and to just improve the, the productivity of the soil. So this is how I plan to implement the project. The training will have basic, the last one is to, I want first of all to encourage my community to stop planting only maize and beans. I feel like we are stuck in a sort of nostalgia because when I was growing up, we used to plant maize and beans year in, year out. But then the rains were a bit fairer at that time, so we would get at least, something to eat, then we would sell the surplus. But with time, it really changed, and the rain is not even adequate. Like for example, right now it's in April, towards the end, and this is just when the rains are starting to, come. And normally they would start somewhere in March. But now it's taken really quite a long time, and I think it's definitely because of climate change. So I want to train them to just, forget about the old times and to adapt to the change right now. So we'll educate them also to plant drought-resistant crops, which will at least, they will increase the chances of harvesting something at least. Then in terms of action-based, I want to train them there's a new technique which we have tried already. You can see the picture on your screen. It's of a lady, and this is in Turkana. So my friend and I, we tried this to just train this community to plant to use this integrated soil management technique, where it's a method where you dig a hole, like a big hole, then you put sawdust, then you put organic manure, then sand, then some just small bit of soil, and it's very effective to grow root crops such as cassava, arrowroot, sweet potatoes, and vegetables. So we realized that if we use this method, we can have the community can actually get enough yield with balanced, as in crops that will give them like a balanced diet. So they can do vegetables, and then they can do like cassava, then which at the end of the day they will have at least something food to start with. Then maybe the surplus they can sell. So the project is linked to these 4 SDGs. The first one is to end hunger. So definitely, if they can, adapt to these measures and take up this practice, they can. It's easier to. It's going to be possible to end hunger. Then the second one is to end poverty, because we realize that if communities do not have food, that's like a direct ticket to poverty, and they cannot be productive. They cannot work. They cannot, take action to improve their economic capacity. Then the other one is on climate action. We realize that one of the things about the SDGs is that on climate action is we have to adapt to these changes. It's unfortunate, but it's happening, and it's very clear right now. So one way of, if like a community such as this is already facing hunger and aridity when climate change was not like a realization already, then it means that now the new changes, then they have to adapt like almost twice. So then that shows that they need to be really informed, and we need so much awareness creation, especially for vulnerable communities. Then the other one is it will promote good health and well-being, which is definitely linked to having good nutrition, especially for the children. It can promote like healthy growth. Okay, so the resources that I need, I grouped them to monetary and non-monetary. I need training materials, which I approximated. I've listed them and I approximated them to cost about $280 US. So I'll need a manual, the board, writing markers, felt plans and reports with case studies and pamphlets. I want to print to do a small pamphlet with just discussing everything so that we can issue them to the communities in a language they understand, mostly maybe Kapa or Swahili. Then they can share with their friends if the ones who don't come for training. Then the other one is a conference fee. We plan to use the municipal grounds for maybe 20 days for like one training each day. So that's 20 days, approximates to $400. Then I plan to provide them with samples of seeds of green grams and sorghum. I thought that the first project should be about green grams and sorghum, which have been tested in the area and they can do very well. So then that comes to about $620 for the 20 groups. Then there's a remuneration for community mobilizers and assistant trainers. Then there's transport and water and snacks. I wasn't sure about the water and snacks, but I think it's very important because it's a community where they're really dealing with so much. So you just need them to motivate them to come, and this is one way. So for the non-monetary resources, I felt that maybe I would enlist the help of 2 other youth from my area to help with registration and the trainings and to do follow-ups. and also the public administration, that is now the area chief, the municipal leaders. They can help with mobilizing people. And since I've worked with them before, it becomes easier for, to request for their assistance to implement the project. Then I also intend to partner with KARI Kenya, that is the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute. It carries research about what plants should be planted in which areas, and they can provide a lot of support in terms of especially advisory support, and also to help to create awareness to the society. So that is a picture from one of my previous trainings, which I was training about. It was about water and sanitation, and we also did something a little bit about water conservation. It was initiating the project, a previous project of digging terraces. So this was coupled with water and sanitation, and we also, put in the terracing. The anticipated impact, first we hope to increase agricultural production to just provide enough food to end hunger. Based on my estimates and what I researched, according to there's a booklet provided by the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute. So they approximated that 1 acre farm can produce like 233 kilograms of green grams worth up to 233 USD. Then it can produce also 700 kilograms of sorghum worth like 231. So at least that can provide them with food for themselves, and then they can sell the surplus. And then I realized that the project has a multiplying effect because the chain members will definitely, if they take up the practice, they will train other people, their neighbors and relatives, and also it can be implemented in other areas. So the overall ripple effect of this project is bound to be quite significant. Yes, I think I am done.
Thank you, Damari. I'm going to turn it over to the judges for questions. Would like to start. I'll move the
First of all, on behalf of myself and I'm sure the other judges, congratulations on the project and what you're undertaking. It's a very exciting one. And having lived in your part of the world for a number of years, I felt even more exciting than it would seem otherwise. But you live in the land of the UN Environmental Program. And I'm wondering whether, in addition to the consultation that you mentioned with the KARI, the Agricultural Center in Nairobi, you've also looked into UNEP to see whether they've had experience in the sorts of projects that you're proposing and whether they could share with you some additional expertise.
With the UN Environmental Program?
Yes.
Well, okay, I only had reached out to the KARI, the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, and they were very ready to actually help and be part of it, but I am not quite sure about the UN, but I can make a point of doing that.
Hello. Thank you for an excellent presentation and your idea, which is absolutely...
Thank you so much.
Putting the principles of the SDG into action is really the way to go. But I would like to ask you, could you give us a few more specifics about your training program on water and sanitation and what the gender implications are of this? Because in your photos about gender, am I speaking clearly enough for the transmission? I noticed in your photographs, the participants in your training seem to be all women, and that has a certain implication to it and a certain positive one. So I wondered if you could just give us any thoughts on that, if that was by design, and what the results might be, but spread out. You talked about each one member who's been trained goes back and trains family and neighbors as well. And so
Yes.
what is on your agenda? What are your topics or your subjects when you do these trainings on water and sanitation?
Okay, for the one that we did on water and sanitation, the project was funded by the German Agro Action. Right now they call themselves the Valtunga Hilfe. And it was generally about training communities about using how to tap rainwater, harvest rainwater and use their sieves they use, their sieves, so how to sieve that and then boil it so that it can just be healthier for them to drink. So in my view and in practice, personally I would be slower to designate a specific demographic, like definitely it's adults, but then in terms of gender I just invite either, because some households don't even have, they're made of single parents. And then also you find that in my community, it's unfortunate, but the men are a bit slow to take up incentives that can actually help their families. So as you saw in the picture, the invitation was to everyone within that community. It was in a place called Kitize. But then when we called out for them, you find that more women are ready to come and to learn. So, and even from the picture where we're digging terraces, you can see that it's actually women who it's just how it happens. They tend to be very proactive. So in a way, in as much as you don't say this gender should come, but then you find that the women are very active in their communities and they do a lot of even manual labor, or they just really want to be involved and they're very ready to learn. So when you call out for them, you find that they turn out in big numbers and they are also very good at spreading the word. So in a way, I wouldn't want to say that we target women, but then you see that they are more proactive. So eventually we end up having more women taking part in the project.
SDG 5.
Hello. Very good presentation. I really like this project. I have sort of two related questions. It strikes me that what you just described actually could be something of an impediment if you're only getting buy-in into the project from sort of one half of the family, and that it strikes me that the sort of value of traditional crops that you described, combined with a struggle to convince an important part of the family unit to buy into it, that could represent something of a pretty big challenge for you to take on in terms of creating a program that will continue when you're no longer involved. So what are the plans to deal with that challenge?
Okay, yeah, I realize that's actually one of the challenges, because I realized that we also, they still plant maize and beans even though they don't get anything, and it's because they're stuck in the past, in the hope that maybe the rains will come again. It's like a gamble. So changing mindsets has been very difficult. It's a really hard thing. But I realize also it takes a lot of continuity in talking to them, because once you show them, like the one on planting, digging the hole and putting sawdust, manure, then soil, and even the terracing project, once they start seeing the results, they get encouraged. So it's mostly an wait and see game. So when we're starting, so they'll say, we'll just do it, but then they're very ready to do it, but they're not very sure about the results. So I want to believe that once they see the results, that they're actually getting something from their fields, and it's not empty year in, year out. At least that's one incentive. Then probably the other way would be to liaise with the NGOs that work in these communities to sort of maybe pick up the project once this is done, and also expand it to other areas so that there's some sort of continuity, I believe.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, Damaris, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So our next presenter will be presenting in person, and our presentation will be given by Bradley Larson. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you for considering me for the Graduate Sustainable Development Challenge. Today I'll be discussing my proposal, integrating SDGs into the STEM classroom. This project aims to address Goal 4, quality education. More specifically, I've actually chosen to narrow it down to target 4.7, which reads, by 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles. Sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity, and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. The challenge that I've actually chosen to address has two parts. First, generally there is a low awareness of the SDGs in the United States. A GlobeScan report published in 2017 noted that 64% of respondents had no knowledge of the SDGs, while only 25% and 11% respectively noted having some or a lot of knowledge. This is a problem because learners need the opportunities to acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. While I was unable to find detailed information on surveying learners in the United States, surveying students, I can extrapolate that their knowledge of the SDGs cannot be dramatically higher than that of the population at large. The second part of this challenge is that while there are several very valuable resources out there for teaching the SDGs, including UNESCO's Education for Sustainable Development Goals, learning objectives, most of these materials are actually focused on extracurricular opportunities like field trips or school assemblies, seminars, and that sort of work. Unfortunately, many schools and school districts are unable to actually fund or unwilling to fund these programs. Where there is co-curricular materials available, these really are focused in on the humanities. So this means that there's actually a open door, and STEM materials are not actually widely available. So you're missing out on an entire group of students who might be able to get more SDG awareness through their STEM classes. So I want to talk about the solution that I have for this problem. My solution is to develop, test, and distribute materials to allow STEM teachers to introduce the SDGs within their individual course curricula. The first course that I'm proposing to develop materials for is the AP Computer Science curriculum. So you might ask the question, why AP Computer Science? The College Board that oversees the AP Computer Science program has developed a framework for the course. However, this leaves a high amount of customizability within the course curriculum for individual teachers. While there are a required 20 hours of programming labs throughout the course, these assignments are not actually what is tested. What they're testing are the programming concepts that the students are learning. These labs actually give the students the opportunity to experiment with those and test those in a classroom environment. Because there are not specific labs that are prescribed by the program, teachers can actually take any kind of external data that they want to incorporate into the program. So that means that if they are interested in bringing in real-world information, if they're interested in integrating another concept like the Sustainable Development Goals, they are free to do that within their class. Additionally, because it is a national program, the AP test actually will serve as a benchmark. Results on these tests should, in theory, with the class, be similar from year to year. And this gives us a way to make sure that these students are still having a effective computer science education, even though the SDGs have been added into the course itself. Additionally, because there is a national network of teachers who are teaching the AP Science framework, the College Board provides message boards to allow teachers to collaborate. These are actually one of the primary methods that I would see for actually spreading any kind of materials or results from this proposal. Finally, because the AP Computer Science framework represents what is supposed to be a college-level intro to programming course, these materials can actually be modified for other levels of programming courses. So if a school has an intro to programming course that's not at the AP level, some of the easier labs can be used for that. And for college professors, it could be actually incorporated into their intro to programming curriculum at the collegiate level as well. For this proposal, I've determined 3 phases of action steps: development, testing, and distribution. During the development phase, the first step is to analyze the current labs and determine the proper context for SDG integrated assignments. This is so that the labs not only reflect the SDGs, but also reflect the needs of the students and ensure that they're actually able to get the information that they need out of that program, out of the program as well. The next step is to determine the appropriate types of data for the labs. So not every kind of data point is going to work for each lab. There's going to necessarily need to be different types of data used for the different labs in the year. The next step is to gather data from publicly available data sources. Luckily with the SDGs, there's a wealth of data available, and the UN has been very, very good about sharing these publicly, and I intend to tap into those sources. Finally, the last part of the development process is to actually work with an AP Computer Science teacher to create new course materials as well as an awareness survey to gauge students' awareness before and after the course. The next step is the testing stage. Since I'm not a teacher, since I know very little about AP Computer Science actually, this would involve a computer science teacher that I'm working with teaching a version of the pilot course, incorporating those labs into her classroom. As I mentioned before, the SDG awareness surveys developed would be administered before and after the course to determine if their awareness has improved, what they've learned over the course of the year, and if they have gathered any new experience with the SDGs. Finally, the last step of that testing process is going to be to compare the AP test results to those from previous years in order to make sure that these students are actually still learning everything that they need to learn, and that they haven't been unnecessarily sidetracked by the addition of the SDGs into the curriculum. The next stage of this process is really dependent on what happens during the testing stage. If everything goes right, if the students are learning more about the SDGs, and the students have continued to meet or exceed the scores from previous years on the AP exam, it is my intent to package and share the materials online free of charge to other teachers to allow them to incorporate those materials into their curriculum. Next, once those materials are a little bit more polished, once the results have been determined and everything looks right, I would really want to present these materials and the results at a conference to get others who might not be necessarily in the computer science field to be interested in incorporating the SDGs into their STEM classrooms, and know that it's not just within the realm of the humanities. Finally, the last step really of this first portion would be to identify additional STEM courses for SDG integration. The AP Computer Science course is an ideal course to start with, but I can imagine plenty of ways that the SDGs can be incorporated into other classes across the curriculum. So what are the impact and results of this project? The impact and results are to increase student knowledge of the SDGs, and as I've said multiple times, students must meet or exceed AP exam results from previous years in order to consider this a success. Additionally, I would like to have this be able to provide easily accessible SDG-focused curriculum materials to teachers who may not come into contact with it regularly. And ultimately, my goal is to expand SDG integration into other STEM courses. The implementation strategy for this project. You might ask about the feasibility and sustainability of this project, given that I am not a computer science teacher. I actually already have an existing partnership with an AP computer science teacher. She's sitting in the back there. And I intend to actually gather materials based on public data sources. So ultimately, the biggest benefit to this program is that the single largest expense will be the time spent on it. It is not monetarily expensive, it's going to be a matter of taking the time and effort to create the materials, gather the data, and ultimately, if everything goes well, if everything passes through testing, then spread the good news about the program and get that out to everyone. As it's not something that will just go out into the world on its own. Finally, before I leave you some time for questions, this is a timeline that's just kind of showing what the first year cycle of this would look like. Ultimately, there's going to be the development stage taking place over the summer. We intend to launch the pilot class in the fall when the school year starts. Regardless of the outcomes of the challenge today, this is a project that is going to be going forward in some way, shape, or form. We've already set aside some time this summer to work on it. And ultimately, as the school year wraps up, as the AP test results come back, then it will be a chance to actually evaluate the project, what's been done, and determine whether or not it makes sense to expand it the way it is, or if those materials are ready to be passed along to others. And now I have some time to look back.
Only one question. You mentioned research, and first of all, thank you very much. It's a wonderful presentation, and I think all of us would love for you to succeed and bring it into the curriculum as soon as possible. Have you looked into the U.S. Statistical Commission and the group that's working on the indicators for the SDGs?
So actually, back on the slide, whoops, right there, there's the SDG indicator website, which is actually really amazing. I was there a couple days ago and was playing with it, and you can pull information on any of the indicators of the SDGs, which means it's going to be a really powerful resource in this project moving forward.
I think so, but not only on the website, but I think they're very open for you to consult with people doing it as to how they develop the indicators, because you're talking about a process when you're talking about that course that you're looking to integrate, rather than necessarily the substance of the course.
Yes.
So you need some substance, which is your point on data, and I think well taken. But the exciting thing about the indicators, and I think in correlation with what we're doing, is to talk to the people who develop and are developing the indicators and working with some of the challenges that they're facing, the challenges that you're trying to incorporate in the course.
Yeah, definitely. I would be excited to work with them on that. Yes?
Related, first of all, I'll say also it's a very good project and your slides are beautiful. Good design, nice colors chosen.
If anyone wants the template, I can share.
I'm wondering why not go straight to College Board in order to kick this off the ground? That would seem sort of the first strategy I would think of.
I mean, the College Board is an institution, and all institutions are very large ships. They're hard to turn. They're hard to necessarily move unless you have the right connections, you know the right people to talk to, and the right people to advocate with. Starting this going straight to the teachers means that there's a lot more individualized impact at that level. And if it becomes something that is moving within the teachers who are teaching the course, then it would give a stronger case to take to the College Board later and say, look, all of these teachers are integrating this. Is there a way that you can work with us to produce materials on it, or feature this on the website? There's a number of different avenues, but I think taking it to the teachers first and building kind of almost a grassroots support there for it, rather than going to the College Board first and then having them kind of talk it down from on high.
Yeah, Bradley,
Well, that's exactly on that point, that's why.
we good?
Could I
Go,
just
yes.
one sort of direct follow-up to these two
Please.
questions? We had a parallel in the, so my question is, after you have the early adapters, which I think is a great strategy, and then maybe approach an institutional sponsor on it, would you consider seeking to have some question on the AP exam on computer science that would relate to the SDGs?
I think that might be a bit of a stretch, because the AP exam is really about the programming concepts. Now, because the programming concepts are universal, it might be something that they would be able to use data related to the SDGs as part of it, but it would never be a case where they would want to actually teach on the concepts of the SDGs. So maybe it might be an opportunity where down the road, that data could be incorporated, but there's never going to really be the option for them to say that, because some schools might never incorporate the SDGs into their curricula, and you wouldn't want to leave those students out on this.
I'm saying this because we had a proposal to teach international law in law schools that would be boosted if international law were tested on bar exams.
Yeah.
And so that was my parallel example. But it could be an illustration on a question on a standardized text.
Definitely.
Bradley, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I really resonate with the creative way you've approached the SDG, and included a community of people who often don't become involved or aren't even aware of the SDGs because of the reasons that you really eloquently stated. So I commend you in looking at the SDGs from that kind of approach, and I thought your justification for choosing AP Computer Science was really excellent for the outline that you presented to us. So really good, thorough presentation, and something that's really necessary as we seek to expand this, appreciation for the SDGs. So thank you.
No, well, I would just like to echo that. In my work, we spend a lot of time focused on how do we infuse UN content into K through 12 education in America, and it's a difficult challenge because there are 10,000 school districts. They all have decision-making authority on curriculum. There is no high-stakes testing for social studies that would be a natural unit to focus on. So your kind of Trojan horse strategy of let's get it in as content on something that isn't testing that content but has a national platform behind it, I think is really useful. But it would be helpful for me to get just a thumbnail sketch of what one of these units would look like.
So unfortunately, I'm not the expert here on actually designing the lab. My biggest role in this would be to actually, go into the UN's indicators website, try and find the appropriate data for it, as well as some of the contextualization around why that data matters.
And as a non-STEM person, is it that it would be a programming exercise where you're using SDG data points or something like that?
Yes, so it would really be using those SDG data points instead of using something like which fish go in which aquarium. It would be using SDG data. And inherently, there's going to be an option to provide additional context for the SDGs and why this matters and why it's important and why that real world data is applicable to them instead of than really just relying on basically just created data that's easy to work with. Yes?
Interesting project and nice presentation. I'm still curious in terms of feasibility, since your goal is to increase the awareness of SDGs. I'm still curious that why you choose to integrate the SDGs into AP Computer Science instead of like AP Human Geography, or like something like that.
I mean, one of the reasons is actually because the individual that I'm working with has had success integrating other social justice topics into her classroom. And we had a couple discussions about this over the previous year about what other topics could be entered in there, and my interest in international relations and general globalization of education kind of led down the path to the SDGs being a topic for integration into that course.
That is all the time we have for questions. Thank you, Bradley.
Yes, they are.
Okay, our next presenter has come from New York, Martha Romaine Sinatra. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, judges. It's been really wonderful, meeting with everyone, talking with families, and it's been a really wonderful experience, listening to people's presentations and their wonderful ideas. So I know we're almost at dinner, so if you could just bear with me, I promise I won't take up too much of your time. If I just quickly. Yeah. Oh, there we go. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so thank you again very much for your kind attention. My UN Development Goal is goal number 16, which has to do with peace, justice, and strong institutions. So, in some ways, the world is getting better. According to the World Bank, we were 5 years ahead of schedule of our UN Millennium Development Goal to reduce global poverty by 1/2. We reached that goal in 2010, instead of 2015. But in spite of this, many other problems persist: gender inequality, climate change, and the muzzling of free speech around the world. In particular, democratic institutions are under attack. Reporters Without Borders reported an increase in instances of threats and violence against reporters, particularly under the regimes of far-right despotic leaders. Some examples of this are the Brexit movement in the UK, Bolsonaro's election in Brazil, and last but certainly not least, the election of Donald Trump in the United States in November 2016. Strong institutions cannot exist without adequate measures for transparency and accountability. Without the foundation of liberal, rules-based democracy, no UN development goal, no matter how innovative, can be achieved. It will be stifled by corrupt, inefficient governments. My solution is a progressive web app from the UN Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights that contains a survey allowing citizens around the world to report on conditions of their respective governments without fear of retaliation. The data from these surveys will be compiled into an annual report that will be made publicly available so key stakeholders and policymakers can make determinations about regions, countries, and trends. The objective is to promote transparency in governments and institutions to bring about justice. As an alternative, for those who fear tracking and reprisal, they may anonymously text a secure number to take the survey to maximize privacy and anonymity. Additionally, data will be uploaded onto a secure server and a feature will be installed to block bots and dummy responses. So for example, one of the issues that happened a couple of years ago during the presidential election of 2016 were content farms. And in Russia, there were various farms of people sitting there creating ads all day. That was their job. So if there was an app available with a survey, conceivably someone who might want to steal that data and create a content farm to create dummy responses, there would be a development in this app that would prevent that so that the responses come from people and not bots or machines. So here are some examples of people and their concern. They are not real people, but they are based on real situations. So we have fictional person Janelle Brown. She's 37. She lives in Washington, D.C. She's a customer service representative. She makes $33,000 a year. There are 4 people in her household, and her immediate concern is that DC government has closed down an OB/GYN clinic in the southwest quadrant that serves low-income communities. She has high blood pressure. She's at risk for preeclampsia, and preeclampsia needs to be monitored weekly. So this would be a good example of a local issue. So the survey will contain 3 sections: local, state, and federal, so country level. This would actually be a really good example of a local issue. This is something that is impacting her right away in her community. Next up, we have a professor in Poland who lives in Warsaw. His concern is that far-right political parties are taking up too many seats in parliament and could result in pushing the country to leave the EU. This is not a hypothetical situation. This is something that is happening right now in Europe with places like Italy and Hungary and Poland. There are multiple populist far-right governments that are working to... Do you know who that is? Okay, someone dropped in on us, I guess. Let's hear about this. Sorry, where was I? This is not an isolated incident in Poland. In places like Italy and Hungary, there are multiple far-right political organizations and parties that are actually pushing for this right now. So leaving the EU, in my personal beliefs, I realize that might not be sure everyone's a pretty bad idea. It's an institution that supports free trade, which is a fundamental tenet of democracy. As a final example, we have Jinbu. She's 45. She is a writer, lawyer, and activist. And her concern is that her husband has been detained without trial for 156 days. The arrest occurred several weeks after her husband posted criticism of a Chinese policy. We suspect her phone is being tapped and she's being monitored, so she would be an excellent candidate for texting a secure number. Downloading an app would probably be too dangerous. Okay, so how do you do this? How do we pull this off? How do you make an app available to everybody, all of their phones, one step at a time? So my intention, as I am an incoming Seton Hall graduate student, is to develop questions with some of you, Seton Hall University professors and students. So I want to know what you think. What would be an important question to ask? What are people's concerns as you do your research and you meet with people? What are people coming to you to talk about? Next, after that, pitch nonprofits and software engineers to help develop this app. There is nothing wrong with asking nicely. I do it all the time. There are plenty of computer science departments in this university, NYU, Princeton, Columbia, many of whom had free time on their hands and wanted to deep dive into really interesting projects. Some of them will do it for free, some of them will do it for pizza, some of them will do it with a modest sum that you can give them. Finally, last action step is beta testing the questionnaire on a small targeted population. The first one that comes to mind is, maybe a local church in a Spanish-speaking community. They're all in there one Sunday, get up there, I speak Spanish, my mother does, ask them really nicely, would you please take this questionnaire, let us know what you think. That would be a really great way to get people comfortable with the questions. If they don't like the question, they're too broad, too specific. And I'm anticipating we're going to be beta testing for a while because I think different people are going to have different opinions on questions, but this is just a preliminary action step. So because the surveys are going to be anonymous, I want to be as specific as possible with the demographic information. So Kadi wants to know more information on how to present, so I guess. Location, that's going to be really important. We're not giving out these people's names. Age, gender. I've actually broken out gender a little bit more specifically. There are some people who don't identify as male or female. There are some people who identify as transgender. Transgender violence is a really significant global issue. Many people live in fear of harm, retaliation, job loss, or even murder if they're openly transgender, and this is an opportunity for them to voice their true identity. Religious affiliation, we know there are multiple attacks on people who have religious backgrounds, very helpful for us, occupation. So these are all sort of pieces of information that are going to help us know who this person is without necessarily knowing their name. I'd eventually like to get to a point where we can have a translator certification that all answers of the respondent are true and accurate, but we will have a portion that will confirm that the person who is completing the survey is the person who is doing it. You can't do it for someone else, you can't do it on behalf of someone else, unless you are a validated translator and you do not speak one of the 6 UN languages. So obviously these sample questions are subject to change, but these were just some ideas that I had. I want to draw your attention to the final two. My government has free, fair, and frequent elections at the local, state, and federal level. This is probably the biggest indicator as to whether or not a country is truly free in terms of the UN definition of liberal democracy or not. And I also want to give people the opportunity to not necessarily answer a question on, a piece of paper or in app, but to just say how you feel. So I want to give people a box where they can say 250 characters or less, what the situation is if they don't feel that any of the questions are sufficiently specific. So in terms of impact and result, there will be 4 phases of this survey's release. The survey will be available once a year, anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, so it's not going to be available year-round because the data needs to be collected, analyzed, and published. It can only be available during a short window. Once the data is collected, it's collected in a secure server. It will be analyzed both quantitatively and quantitatively, so that in case you get too much quantitative or too little, you'll have one or the other to back you up. Once it's published, it'll be immediately available so that any stakeholder, journalist, researcher, policymaker, military leader can use it to inform the laws of respective countries. It also has applications for business as well. If you are a business and you want to take a huge infrastructure project, for example, China wants to build a high-speed rail in Thailand. This is true. This happened the other day. You're going to have to deal with Thailand's government. Yes, you are. And they had a military coup a few years ago, so that must be a very interesting way of starting discussions. I only have a little bit of time left, but basically I've got 3 phases for implementing: developing questions at Seton Hall, using opportunities at SHU to pitch it to UN bodies, and then partner with the UN to develop an infrastructure we can roll this out. So as a final thought, we all want to connect to each other. We want to speak our minds and be heard. We already do that commercially with things like Amazon and Yelp reviews, and I think that we can harness that to implement democracy and lasting change. So thank you very much.
I think this is a great idea, great project.
Thank you.
I have a technical question.
Sure.
How could you ensure in those closed societies to have access to the app?
Great.
In a country like China, where you have the Great Firewall, right? You can't even use the a VPN in the country, which I tested last time. The VPN no longer works in the country, right? So how do you ensure that people not just have access, and be aware of the existence of the app?
Two things. So that's why I came up with this idea, because I had that exact question, because I beta tested this, presentation, and I, asked my friends who work in local government what they thought, and they said that exact question: how are you going to pull this off in a country like China, a country that I have lived, the language that I speak, and I understand the technical difficulties. So the first answer to your question is that they can text a number. Apps are going to be really easy to track, and pretty much the government in China has virtually unfettered access to an individual's phone. It's going to be harder for them to track a number that you text. You could be buying something, you could be doing anything. It's going to fly more under the radar than an actual app. In terms of your second question, which is awareness, I think that there's 2 aspects to it. One is there's an increasing number of Chinese college students who come to the U.S. and study in the West every year, and they frequently ferret back information about what's going on. And the second part of that is that there have long been underground networks in China, both in terms of churches and Christianity, and also just genuine grassroots democratic movements. Democratic movements have been there. They've been under the surface. They have ways of, breaking through to Western partners in either formal and informal channels. So the hope is that once this news breaks, college students, professors such as yourself, researchers who are, studying here abroad, they're going to know about it. Maybe they'll feel more safer, taking it here, but the information will get out. That's one thing I've learned, being a journalist myself, in a place where, some people don't necessarily want, information to get out. It always gets out. Finds a way.
So thank you very, very much for your presentation. I was wondering on access and awareness, and actually a question as it relates to China too, because Dr. Huang, I've been recently and I've had the VPN troubles, the virtual privatized network, and the Great Firewall is a beast. And so how would the user be sure that their IP address and number is going to be protected?
That's a more technical question. I would probably point to my very helpful and invisible database person who has not appeared yet. But basically, it's number one, it's going to be anonymous. Number 2, if you can't, use the app, you can use a text. Number 3, it's going to be collected into a database that's secure, so it can't be penetrated. So I would need at some point someone to build me a database that's impenetrable. So probably not in the cloud. Basically, it's a very complicated issue because what I'm proposing is where we're moving to as a sort of next stage, which is figuring out how to recalibrate the whole cybersecurity infrastructure, right? So we've already dealt with air, space, land, and sea, and the next part of space that people are moving into, both adversarially, is very much in cyberspace. And China is leading the way in terms of AI and cybersecurity, so we need to figure out a way to respond to that so that people can respond and hold their governments accountable. And I'm thinking that this could be a first step in doing that. Yes.
Audrey, I think it's extraordinary. I think you get paid for ambition on this. My question is not technical, because I'm way behind all people at this table here, so I'm on this. I think if you presented this to the UN, the answer would be no way.
Okay.
So my question to you is, assuming the worst case, I mean, the best case would be say, fantastic, please go ahead full tilt.
Sure.
How would you structure this app not under the UN auspices?
Just a quick follow-up also, because we involve the UN Human Rights Council, I assume, how do you present this to them? Most of the members of the UN's Human Rights Council themselves are violators of human rights.
That's tough, and that's a good question. If someone says no, I don't think the survey would change. I think I would find a different partner. There are NGOs out there, there are corporate, there are corporations, there are NGO arms of corporations. Someone's going to pick up this idea and the UN says no. They're not the only rodeo in town, even though I like them very much.
I agree with that, and it kind of comes to the question I have, which is the fundamental point of this app to collect data and have data available on governance, or is it to create a channel for accountability?
It's both. It's both, because if you are someone who is living in a place, particularly in an underprivileged community, where you don't feel that you can be heard, and you don't feel that your vote matters or your voice matters, you can actually use the app to fill out that survey. The data that other points are going to be aggregated, and you can, as a policymaker and a researcher, you can look at it and you can be like, oh my goodness, I had no idea that transphobia was such a big thing in Costa Rica, because we have 37 people who are afraid, to be out or afraid to go to nightclubs. All of a sudden that pops up on someone's radar for someone such as yourself, because that's something that no one has ever done before. So it is both. It's a way for people to be more open about what they're really feeling without being afraid that their vote doesn't matter, election is going to be rigged, they're going to be dragged out of their homes by their hair. And it's also a way for policy researchers to look at a shifting landscape and not working with static numbers and say, oh my goodness, these are trends that are happening like right now. How do we respond to that in real time?
But there's nothing in place, and it doesn't seem like it's your goal to compel sort of any kind of action once this data is gathered, right? I mean, it relates to this UN question, and in my opinion, that would seem like it would be better set up going to a place like Freedom House or Amnesty, where you're crowdsourcing data and you have a third party that's not compromised in this way. I mean, as tragic as it is to characterize the United Nations Human Rights Council as compromised,
Go ahead.
yes, I mean, it's a good point, right? So I would think we don't expect any kind of assessment coming down from the top. So why not just sort of make this like the best crowdsourced data sourcing project, rather than try to put this executive sort of action into it too?
Because data can be manipulated, and data isn't enough. It isn't enough. And I say this as someone who works in B2B marketing journalism, and write about marketing technology, and we write about things like AI, and I write about data all day, every day. Trust me, it's not enough. It's not enough to get marketers up off their duff to implement better strategies. So just another data project I'm thinking is going to get swallowed. In terms of, incentive to action, I think that in a world where people are really afraid of accountability and they're cracking down on journalists and they're killing them and they're throwing up all these kinds of firewalls, people do fear transparency. And I think one of the things that we need to do is make transparency more of a priority and more of it as a goal, not necessarily a means. So to answer your question, I don't think another data project is going to be enough.
That is all the time we have for questions. Thank you, Marjorie.
Our next presenter has come all the way from the Philippines in order to present in person. So I'm pretty sure she gets the prize for best traveled presenter today. Christine Marie Villaruel, the floor is yours.
It's for the Philippines, so please, I hope you guys are comfortable with me being a little tired. So, Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christine, and I'd like to talk about Gala, which is a mobile application that utilizes an accessibility metric and real-time mapping data, which will hopefully help people using assistive technologies such as wheelchairs, crutches, and walkers be able to not only move around cities, but also shape society. So first, I'll give a brief situation on the world for differently abled people. And then I'll talk about how the UN SDGs particularly address that, how Gala is supposed to collaborate with those ideas, and finally, what I envision Gala to be, and what society I believe Gala will help create. But before that, physics. So kinematics is the study of the motion of bodies, and the forces involved in moving from point A to B. In that movement, energy is transformed from one form to another. This energy is the force needed to accelerate to move a body from rest to action. So this might be tangential to a discussion on the sustainable development of this. But when you think about it carefully, we as humans are constantly on the move. So society continues to move and build upwards and outwards. We create skylines for buildings, reaching up to heavens. Every day, people from different backgrounds in and out of these cities, creating and sharing, transforming energy through the world. Movement isn't everything. So the question I'd like all of us to ask is, have we built and developed our cities in such a manner that allows everybody to move well? How many people might actually have been left behind by the ways we build our cities? So the UN estimates, as well as the World Bank, estimates that there are at least 1.3 billion people who are differently abled in the world. To put that number in context, that's roughly the same population as China. And we should assume that that number will continue to increase as the world's population continues to age. So in the Philippines, you have 19 million Filipinos experiencing mobility issues. That's almost 15% of our population. So especially in the Philippines, this is a particular issue given that our elderly population is at 8.2% of the population. And 6.2 is actually the healthy number for the usual working population. So despite this large number of people who are continually growing, our cities are not built to accommodate them. So similar studies have been showing the lack of accessibility to emergency response mechanisms, to public transportation, to health services. But I think it's better to illustrate by bringing you to Manila. So this is Makati. It is supposed to be the most accessible and most urbanly developed place in the Philippines. I want you to look at here. So if you can see, it's very narrow and it's very rough. So walkers and wheelchairs cannot access it. If you look at the escalator, there's a flight of stairs. So can you imagine someone with a wheelchair actually accessing that escalator? And that assumes that it's working. So let's go. It's just a real problem in the Philippines. And let's go underground. So this is an underpass. It complies with the requirement to have an escalator, but it hasn't been working. I've been using this commute for years. It hasn't been fixed. If you look at the flight of stairs, I can't imagine anyone with an escalator, with a wheelchair or a walker or crutches walking through that. This all translates to the difficulty and inability of an individual using a wheelchair or any other kind of assistive technology to access healthcare, to secure long-term employment and schooling. So, according to the US statistics, very general statistics from 2006, the number of differently abled people looking for employment, out of that number, only 80% of these people are unemployed. So there's a huge gap. But it's interesting because there are actually incentives and studies showing that people want to hire these people. So what's happening? What does that mean for society? So global evidence suggests that the unemployment of people with disabilities and mobility issues translates to a GDP loss of about 5 to 7% of any nation. So for US, according to my studies, that's $1.4 trillion loss for the US, which is an opportunity that the US is not taking much more for the underdeveloped countries like my own. So what are we doing to fix that gap between the ability of these mobility challenged individuals to help society and the gap of them not being able to literally go to a place to help, to work and to access healthcare? So the UN has created Sustainable Development Goals indicators which clearly target inclusive development. Primarily Goal 11, which calls for universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible public spaces, particularly for differently abled people. 10, which actually discusses the reduced inequality through the promotion of social, economic, and political inclusion of all. 4, when we discuss how transportation and mobility actually limits people, including the differently abled people, from going into society and actually making work happen. And finally, my favorite, 17, partnership for the goals. So I'm going to share why it's my favorite. Goal 17 is about monitoring progress. It's about putting together data and making it into a policy, as well as public and private civic society work together. So the UN has noted that data needed to monitor progress in the SDG indicators I mentioned has been systematically unavailable. So this is really weird, given that the collection and use of data is, I think, one of the most powerful ways that we move our policymakers to actually do something. How we get development programs on track, how we actually get funding, if you're interested in that kind of program. So a while ago, I shared a lot of data from international estimates, and those are just estimates. But the truth is, for less developed countries like my own, the data doesn't really exist. So there's no way to know how burdensome our social infrastructure, how vulnerable these people are, at least in my country. So for example, in our last national census, questions on disabilities were actually left out, simply because there was no time. According to them, it takes too long to create a census with other indicators they needed to look at. So what does that mean? Differently abled people have been rendered almost invisible in terms of policy and in terms of international funding for programs for them. And I just don't believe that should stand. So this is my solution, the GALA app. So GALA is a Filipino word which roughly translates to wandering, moving around. But I found out recently that GALA is also an English word, which is a joyful event. And that's exactly what I want for, yes. That's exactly what I want for GALA. I want to enhance every person's experience, whether or not they use a wheelchair or a walker, to move around the city from a necessary burden into a joyous exercise of what you can do to shape the world. So it's a mapping platform which not only shows the presence or absence of related infrastructures, which is what the competition is doing right now, but it actually uses the data and understands and measures it so we know that the infrastructures concerning mobility challenged individuals, such as sidewalks, ramps, elevators, footbridges, and parking, are not just present, but are actually usable and working for these people. So how would GALA work? So most mobility challenged individuals have tried and tested ways on how to move around. But with GALA, we want to present options. We want to present them options on knowing which places are accessible for them, how much traveling to these places would cost, how much physical effort that they would have to do, and how long would it take to get there. So GALA is the ability to give the freedom on how to move. So GALA has 3 plans of action. Firstly, we'll focus on public transportation and the routes involved, rank them using the accessibility metric and algorithm that we were creating. Phase 2 is about scaling up, getting public and private establishments and small communities to also be grants. This is also very important for government buildings as well. And thirdly, our plan is to scale up all the way citywide and hopefully bring GALA to different cities that have the same issues. So this is our timeline. So phase 1 is about the metric and the algorithm that we're using. So we're using probability metrics, which I won't discuss completely, but the idea is that there are many factors for movement for people, mobility challenged people. So we have to identify those factors in making that metric. And that's at the stage that we are now. So app development will require the most financing. So if we're gonna take a whole year for that, included here is the beta version for public transportation. So the next and the year second, hopefully by then we'll go into establishments and that will help provide more funding as well. And year 3 is for city mapping already. So we hope to finish at least a prototype inside Makati BGC because they have the most income as a government and they're the most accessible in terms of politics. They're more interested in this kind of thing, so they're ready for this kind of project. So how do we do plan 1? Plan 1, phase 1, as I said, is the most financially costly. So my plan of action is to ally myself with different. We're actually doing it already. So we're allying with a lot of organizations for the aged community, senior citizens. We're also planning on working with the autistic societies in Makati as well as other places. Right now, government is not at a point where they can help because it's election season in this week. So we've lost contact there, but I'm sure that by August it will return because they're all looking for new projects to support. And then, most importantly, I want to work with the Philippine Data and Development community. In the Philippines, innovation is growing. The startup community is very strong. So hopefully that will also alleviate costs as well. And as well as we have partners already working with public transportation. So we have Jacaro, transportation.ph. So all of these already map the areas, they just don't map it for accessibility. So that's where we come in. So how do we plan on sustaining the progress? So phase 2 is about being able to afford the data cloud that we need. So we're using freemium accounts. The assumption is that we'll have 50,000 users. And then hopefully by phase 2, we have enough data to create rankings and executive reports for private compliance firms as well as government firms. So the idea is maybe a restaurant or real estate area would like to know how accessible their particular places are. So we could provide reports there and provide places for them to improve pain points for accessibility for them. Most of the money will definitely come from digital marketing. This is because the differently abled community is a big market now, which is starting to be seen by a lot of industry players. So that's 56.3% of all of the community. That includes their allied supporters and friends. So we're seeing a big interest in people marketing their products and materials just for the different people. So what's for phase 3? What I hope for GALA is that we extend beyond mobility challenges. So we work with hearing impaired, sight impaired people who are like sight impaired, and people on the autistic spectrum. And again, I want GALA to not just be for mobility challenged individuals. I want it to be for abled individuals as well. Because the whole point is to be inclusive, not just make a product for them, but for the entire society. So I'm going to talk about myself. Right now, I'm working with a team which has a combined number of 55 years of experience. And we're in physics, we're in operations, I'm in development work. We have an architect and urban planner, which is very important for our public transportation work. and we have a mechanical engineer. But why do I personally feel the need to move for Gala? In my field work in the slums of Manila, I was working with families who are living in suboptimal living conditions, where they were vulnerable to the problems of disasters. So just recently we had an earthquake. So the community texted me that their houses are gone, for example. But the people that struck me were the aged people and the young people who were unable to move around. So these people have so much potential, and yet they're not able to do anything about it because society has built cities that leave them behind. So I wanted to change that. I think about them a lot, and I think about all the opportunities that I have as an able individual, and how if they had that, I feel like they would have been able to do so much more because they have better insight on what it's like to be a young Filipino with so much struggle and so much things to do. But we don't have that anymore, and I feel that Gala is a way for them to get what I have and make it their own. So back to more physics. Basic physics, force equals mass acceleration. So what I want for Gala is that Gala is the acceleration which pushes the mass of society, includes differently abled people as well as those who are able individuals, into pushing for a force of a more inclusive society. So I hope, despite my tiredness, and my physics lecture, that all of you feel the need to push as well for an inclusive society. So thank you.
Yeah, so I would just really like to thank you for identifying an often overlooked, marginalized community, and including them in the mosaic that is the human family, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate from your perspective that you talk about joy, and you talk about giving that community voice. I think those are really two important things. And I really love the fact that you used art and design as part of your proposal. And I'm just curious as to who created that logo and that who is that, you or is that your team or who did that?
The team. Actually, the logo has a reason, has a meaning. So it's movement oriented. That's why it's sideways, and then the direction is supposed to move upwards. So the idea of Gala is that this is because we realized that movement shouldn't be a requisite to live. It should be something interesting, should be something fun, enjoyable. So that's what we wanted to reflect, even in the application. So.
And in incorporating art and design into the SDG is something that is also often overlooked. So congratulations.
Marjorie, again, congratulations. I think it's an extraordinary, compelling story that you've told. My question to you is, have you looked into the parallel world of AI and riderless cars, driverless cars rather, and so on, and the work that's being done in that sector around the world? Because your point in goal is something that they, not taking into consideration, certainly would. And there are people who work very actively on that, and I'm wondering how closely have you interacted with them?
So it's actually an option that we were discussing, that we move to stage 2 of Gala app could be about services. So being able to call for an accessible car, for example. So but what I want Gala for is where I think it's necessary. So like new cities and the cities that are not well planned, just like in Manila and Makati. So the need for AI might be a little lower there versus, let's say, in Germany, where this idea exists. They're looking into AI for that. So I think we'll get there, but I'd like to focus on real-time need for their users. We'll get there, maybe after we get to year 3. Yeah.
This is excellent. My favorite thing about this is that the first thing you accomplish is enabling individuals to get around. but then downstream, you're shaming governments and businesses into making sure that they can serve a population that, like you said, is spread around everywhere, and it's hard to sort of centralize. So it's sort of a brilliant design idea. I just kind of want to know, want you to get inside the data collection process. Is this crowdsourced by users? Is it automatically collected?
So that's a great question. So there's actually two options available. So that's your usual Google Maps, your map editors, and in Waze what they do is community-centric. So Gala wants to use all three. So one, we get data from the users themselves, which is perfect because they know what they need. Secondly, in terms of infrastructure, using partners like Google Maps and Waze already, and that strong open source mapping available already around the world is actually really useful. So we'll be able to develop the app better. What's great about Gala is that the technology exists. It's being used already, it's just not being used for these people. So that's what I wanted to resolve.
It's time for a final question.
And just to clarify, at this point, you got your concept, like you do not have the capital for app development at this point.
So it just so happens that in the Philippines, it's not a good time. Honestly, to be honest, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
We're working towards getting angel investors and venture capitalists, working with local government. But the moment you have elections, it just that's like wipe out. But that's why I realized that it's important to get more insight and more validation really from competitions like this, because that's how you get people interested in investing in this project, which is workable for businesses as well. And I feel that's where the sustainability of the project itself happens. Because we'll be able to give back money to these venture capitalists if we do it well. Execution, of course.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is joining us from Colombia. Her name is Katja Daza. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Alright, my name is Katja Daza. I am from Colombia, and I am very happy to be here sharing with you a little bit more about my project. Also, I am very happy and honored to be chosen as one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Challenge finalists. So, alright, let me share with you a little bit more information. So, okay, my project is eradicating poverty through education. But what are those sustainable development goals directed for my project? So they are end of poverty and quality education. And what is the problem I want to address with this issue? Very simple. Student dropout, education as a tool to eradicate poverty. Colombian government has defined student dropout as the interruption or disengagement of students from their study. In Colombia, 1 out of 5 students does not continue studying after they complete their elementary school years. About 48 out of 100 students finish high school in the countryside. Colombia, in order to mitigate this issue, has increased not only the coverage and accessibility, but has improved the infrastructure, as well as has delivered some aid to low-income families. But the fact is that that's not enough. Not because we have better infrastructure or more accessibility to education, it means that it will decrease the amount of students that leave school. Now, in the Department of Atlántico, in a study carried out by Universidad del Norte, they found out that around 16,000 of the students left the school in 2014. Now, some of the reasons why they are leaving the school, according to this study, is because they have little enjoyment for school and little motivation for studies, which means that this is something very avoidable from the early years of high school. Now, we need to listen to the population and we need to listen for what they are needing. And if we know, according to these studies, that they are not having enough motivation and enough enjoyment for school, we need to give them those skills, those tools, in order for them to get the motivation that they need. Now, with this project, we want to help them to get that motivation. Because the fact is that most of the times, their family support the decision that they made when they decide to leave the school. And the reason is because they consider education as an impediment for them to reach their goals, especially because they are in poor conditions, living in poor conditions, and they want to increase their incomes. So for that reason, they consider that if they have more incomes, they will contribute to eradicate poverty. But the fact is that if you see their current way of life, you will notice that they are still living in poverty conditions. Some guys commit crimes, some get pregnant, and some of them can hardly access to a job. So as we can see, it means that they made a strong decision when deciding to leave the school. So for that reason, we want to create 3 different scenarios that allow them to get all the motivation that they need in order to keep studying and finally finish school. So the first scenario that we are going to create is Find a Wise Life. This program is going to find what are those gifts, talent, purpose, and all the passion that they have to develop in a project. So for that reason, we want to support them in an inspirational workshop that we will be developing with psychologists and sociologists in order to understand them and also to understand their environment. Second, we are going to be creating a professional network, which is basically like a bank of opportunities that is going to allow them to access to helpful information. A student will have the opportunity to access to scholarships, a student exchange. They will access also to short courses because they hardly have access to internet, which means that they do not know about these opportunities. So we want to be a bridge between the opportunities and them and give them all the support that they need to access to all these opportunities that already exist, but they do not know that they exist. And third, and it's the part that really excites me, that is the Leadership Forum. It's a space created in order to invite not only local and national, but international leaders that has faced in her life adversity and poverty. And in this way, these guys are going to find inspiration, empowerment, and of course, all the skills and resources in order to overcome it too. So with these 3 scenarios, we are going to help these guys to keep studying and finish high school. And the reason is because UNESCO in 2017 informed that at least all the students finish high school, poverty is going to decrease at least to the half, which means that it's a huge challenge right now for us, but we have the solution in our hands, which is education, and of course, we need to motivate these guys to finish. Now, with this project, we want to generate impact, but not only in the student life, but in general. So with this project, we want to decrease student dropout rates in the Department of Atlántico. Also, we want to decrease poverty in the Department of Atlántico through education. We want to impact in the educational system. But why? Because it's not only about taking courses of biology or mathematics or Spanish, but it's about complementing the traditional educational system. Because in this way, they are going to be receiving some classes or receiving some workshops that are going to allow them to understand the reason why they are getting all this information and why they are studying and how they are going to overcome poverty. Also, we are going to teach students to overcome adversity despite their poor living condition and lack of resources. We are going to impact student life because we are going to give them skills, resources, and tools to overcome adversity and poverty with all the information that we will give them. And also we will impact the student environment. Why? Because it's not only impacts student life, we will be impacting the people around them, their family. And in this way, we are going to change the culture of the student dropouts around them. So, now, let's talk about the financial support. We will be needing $45,000 initially, and we will be needing $5,000 for emergency fund. But the 75% of these resources are going to be designated for human resources, which means that with this money we are going to be hiring qualified psychology, sociology, etc. And the 21% is going to be designated for the transportation and food charges for the people in charge for the project. And for finally, a 4% for material resources. That means that are going to be designated for projectors, computers, bags, uniform, etc. Now, this project is going to be developed in the Department of Atlántico, especially in the municipality of Calapa. Why this municipality? Because it's the municipality that has the largest or the highest rate of student dropouts. We are going to be working with a student from the first year of high school and the last year of high school. But why these two specific years? First, because the first year of high school shows the largest or the highest grade, is the grade where the students leave the school the most. And the reason is because they are changing a cycle. They come from scholars, primary or the first year of school, and then they are changing to high school. So this is the year where they are changing from one year to another one. And that's the reason why they stop studying a lot in this year specifically. And we are going to be working in the last year of high school, especially because we want to know what is the impact that this will generate for students once they graduate, and if they, with all the information that we will give them if they decide to access to a university or if they decide to pursue a career. We will be working with this project in the school Técnico Francisco de Paula Santander, and this project is going to be developed every Saturday during 6 months. So that was my project. I hope you enjoy it and that you like it and that you support me, and thank you very much for listening to me.
I'm going to turn it over to the judges to ask some questions. Any questions for Katya?
Katya, the one thing that came through to us judges is your passion. You have a very, very strong drive for your project and its goals, if I'm not incorrect, yes?
I'm so sorry, it's for me very hard to understand.
Okay, then I'm sorry to even ask you a question, but in that way. But what I was saying is congratulations on your passion.
Are you asking me if graduation is my passion?
Yes. Congratulations for it. But my question is, you're passionate about it. How do you feel about the buy-in of the community that you've chosen? Have you tested that buy-in, the interest of that particular Latino community and so on to your proposal? How much have you done, say, focus groups or any way of ascertaining how positive they are in addition to your positiveness?
I'm really sorry, but it appears like the communication is breaking up and I am very unable to understand what you are saying. I'm really so sorry.
Hi, Katya, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you clear, yeah. I can hear you right
Go ahead and
now.
repeat the question. So what he said is, congratulations on your passion for this project. You can really see that comes through. And so his question was, like, aside for the passion that you have, what is the buy-in of the community? Have you done any focus groups to see what does this community feel about this project?
Okay, I especially chose to work with this project because I had the opportunity to work in that school and give them myself about how I overcame adversity. So for that experience, I have the opportunity to notice the way they listening to me and how inspired they were to actually pursue a career and overcome poverty too. So yeah, the community is actually very happy to be part of this project. I already started to work with this community actually, and they are very happy, as I said before, to be part of it.
I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tinker. If you can't hear her, I'll say it again, but I'll have her say it first.
Thank you very much, and good luck. Can you hear, or shall I just speak and then have the question relayed to you?
So Katya, if you watch your messages, I'll type it to you at the same time as they're saying it. Or you can come up here.
Maybe it's better to type it. Could you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Hello, okay. Thank you so much, and all the best in your work in the community.
Thank you very much.
But we are a global audience. Could you give us a little more information? Where is this community and where is this province? That's question one. And what part of Colombia is this? And the second question, do you see this project that could be replicated elsewhere? If so, how can you scale it up? Okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your words. Okay, first, as I said in my project, this project is going to be developed in the Department of Atlántico. It's in the north of Colombia and where I live. The municipality chosen was Jalapa, especially because it's a municipality that has the highest rate of student dropout in this department, okay? Now, this is a project that can be replied in any other place, especially because student dropout is an issue that actually is not only happening in the Department of Atlántico, but it's happening too in the whole country and in many other countries, which means that we can apply this system or this project to many other communities, since right now, one of the reasons why students are leaving schools is because they don't find enough motivation and enjoyment for what they are studying. So yeah, I consider that this can be something that we can apply in other communities as well as in other countries.
Thank you.
Do you want to come up or do you want me to relay it?
Hi, Katya. Thank you very much for your presentation. We all really enjoyed it. I had a question about how you all want to motivate the students, and specifically the professional network. So how are the professional networks you mentioned put together to really help to motivate? Is this like a mentorship, or is a mentorship program, or simply role models, or how does the professional network reflect the motivations of the students?
Okay, thank you for your question. As I said first, in order to motivate these guys, we are going to have 3 different scenarios, which means that the first scenario is the one that is going to give them all the motivation and empowerment that they need. So this is the Finding Oneself program, okay? That's the inspirational workshop. But with the professional network, we are going to create a database with opportunities. It's like a bank of opportunities that will allow to these guys to find opportunities that they hardly ever have access to, right? So we are going to show them all the scholarships that exist for them, short courses that are going to enrich their academic and professional life.
You can just repeat it. What measures will she look at to determine success, and what's the timeline?
So we have a question from Dr. Huddleston about what measures will you use to determine success, and what is the timeline for your project?
Okay, the timeline for my project are is initially 6 months. And the reason is because in my project we consider that in these first 6 months, we can see according to the students' attitude toward the project, if they are really interested and if they are applying all the information that we are giving them. So that's the measurement that we are going to use to know if the project is working or not. According to the attitude that they reflect for the project, we are going to be able to determine if this is working or not.
think we have time for one final question, if anyone has one. Any final questions? All right, thank you, Katya.
It's been a long day, but it's been an enjoyable one. And so, in order to end the day properly, let me first begin by saying a couple of thank yous. Of course, I have to say thank you to Dean Andrea Bartoli and Department Chair Dr. Ben Goldfrank for their support in getting behind me and allowing the center to run this program once again. I also want to say thank you to all of the judges who have been participating today. It was a real pleasure for me because, as you know, in the morning I was participating as a judge, and just now I was observing. And both the judging and the observing were wonderful experiences because you may have noticed that both this morning and this afternoon the judging took a little bit longer than expected because the presentations were of such high quality and the judging was so close that it took us a bit of time to work through everything. But I'm happy to say that as a judging participant, it was a pleasure to experience the teamwork of my colleagues. And as an observer, it was a pleasure to watch my colleagues offering ideas and feedback and coming to a consensus. It was a true pleasure. I also, of course, want to thank Kendra Brock, who is the of the center, who you can tell is my right arm and more than half of my brain most of the time. But I also want to thank, of course, the student presenters, without whom there would have been no event today. And I also want to thank their parents, because in different ways, sometimes indirectly and sometimes directly, you could see the connections, the inspiration, the lived experience, and the support that was coming through, allowing the student presenters to give the presentations that they actually gave, which we all enjoyed so much today. And what I'd like to do at this point, before we make the final presentations, is I'd like to toss the microphone to Dr. Courtney Smith, who is our Senior Associate Dean, and ask him to say a few words to us.
Thank you, Father Brian. I understand I'm the only person standing between you and finding out the results of the competition. It's sort of like being the only person between you and a meal. So I promise I won't talk for more than an hour, and then we'll get right on to the words. Just kidding. I want to echo the words of thanks to Father Brian and to Kendra for organizing the conference this year, the competition. This is really a great way to celebrate the work of the SDGs. I was at an event yesterday at the UN that was SDG related, and it was being held in the ECOSOC chamber. Have any of you been to the ECOSOC chamber before? If you ever get a chance to tour UN headquarters, the ECOSOC chamber is very neat because the architect intentionally designed something unique about the ceiling in the room. The ceiling is only finished for about the first half of the room. In the back half, you can see the air ducts and the exposed wiring and those kinds of things. And the architect did that intentionally to suggest that the work of the UN in economic and social areas, which relate to a lot of what we talked about today on the Sustainable Development Goals, is going to be ongoing, a project that will never be done. As we make progress, we want to continually make progress. The other thing that struck me about the session yesterday, and it's true definitely here again today, is that in order for the Sustainable Development Goals to be successful, it's going to take the work of young people. Okay. That is absolutely essential. We had a couple of the questioners earlier today made reference to the Millennium Development Goals that were a 15-year project that went from 2000 to 2015. Since we have the Sustainable Development Goals, it's pretty obvious that the MDGs didn't achieve. They were successful in many respects, but they didn't finish the work. I think unfortunately the same will be true with the SDGs. We'll accomplish a lot, but the work will not be done. So everybody in this room, whether you're a high school freshman and sophomore, I think we began with Jeffrey as a sophomore, all the way up to a graduate student that may have already had a project and you've already got experience in the field and thinking about graduate study to take that project to the next level. All of you are going to have work to do on the Sustainable Development Goals because we're not going to finish by 2030. We'll make progress, but there will be more work to be done. So that's why a project like this is so important. I also want to just say personally, one of the reasons why I became an academic, and I think this is probably true for some of the other judges, is for the opportunity to learn alongside our students. There's this, my advisor at one point to me, the semester I was allowed to start teaching on my own, said, let me tell you a little secret. He said, the students pay the tuition, but it's really the professors that get to learn. I like to think everybody learns, not just the professors, but he was certainly right that the professors learn. And even though in the earlier rounds of judging on paper, I'd read every single proposal that was presented here today, I still learned something new today from each and every one of you, and I thank you for that because your insights are really tremendous. And because of that, I want to highlight, Brian's going to recognize the top 2 winners, the first and second place for both the undergraduate competition and the graduate competition. I want to highlight and just remind all of you, hopefully you remember that just by being here as a finalist, you've already won a scholarship, right? If you're a graduate student and you're one of the 5 who presented today, you've already won a scholarship that's at least the equivalent of a 3-credit course here, basically $3,600, $3,700 in that range. So if you're a graduate student and you come to one of our graduate programs, one of your classes is free. That's true for every graduate student here today. If you're an undergraduate student and you're here presenting today, that means you won a scholarship of at least $4,000 for your 4 years of study at Seton Hall. Okay, that would be $1,000 a year. Okay, that's a minimum for everybody here if you choose to enroll. Okay, the first and second place winners do get larger scholarships and they do get cash prizes, but just by being here today, you've already won something if you decide to enroll here. So just please keep that in mind. All of you all are winners. And that's a testament to why the work of the judges, as Brian indicated, took longer than we planned. Okay? So I'm going to turn it back over to Brian for the real important news of recognizing the top 2 places. I'll see the rest of my hour back to Brian. So, Brian, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try not to exhaust the entire hour that you delegated back to me. We got a connection? No. So let's go right to the undergraduate. I'm happy to announce that our second place winner is Sweta Sivakarunathan. I said it much better this time. Congratulations. You got that on the screen? Apparently we have her, but not on the screen because technology is wonderful.
She missed something.
She's not. Tell her no, she missed nothing.
And show her a picture of her.
Brian, here, hold that up and
Okay.
stand in front of the camera. She is online, right?
Yeah, she is online.
Yeah. So you can
Let me turn her around. All right. So congratulations. You are the second place winner.
Now, if only we could get it on the screen. I hope you have a good Zoom lens. Congratulations. Okay.
Have a good rest of your days. Okay. Bye.
Okay. And our first place undergraduate winner is Megan Sullivan. Congratulations. So for the undergraduate first place winner, Megan, just so that you're aware, your cash prize is $2,500, and you get a scholarship of $10,000 over the 4 years, which is $2,500 a year. So I hope you come and use it.
The cash prize you get no matter what. The scholarship is just at Seton Hall. Yeah, just to be clear. Yeah, I would get in trouble. Yeah, I would get in trouble if I said otherwise.
We'll never let you get in trouble.
Send a beer copy.
And I would be the one getting in trouble.
Okay. And we are in the process. Let's see if the technology works better this time. Oh, the technology is looking promising. Shall we do this the fun way? Have we got it?
No,
it's not on the
we don't
screen.
have it.
Oh, okay. Well,
For some reason, it's not working.
okay.
All right. So I don't know if you can see that, but congratulations.
Can you see it?
You're the second place winner. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So as the graduate second place winner, in addition to the cash prize, you get a scholarship worth up to 25% of the degree that you come here to study for. So we hope that you come. Nicely done.
Congratulations.
Okay. And our first place graduate winner is Christine Marie Villaruel. So in addition to your cash prize, if you come here, you get a scholarship worth 50% of the degree or the certificate that you pursue. So very nicely done.